You're listening to 4CRB's interviews and talkback series.
Welcome to the studio and welcome to the microphone, Supreme Court Judge David Ashton Lewis.
Well, thank you for having me, and what a tremendous week it was on the fundraising. Gosh, I listen to it every day, and I must compliment you, Cole. I must compliment Robin. You two led. I know it's a team effort, but by golly, I mean, it was tremendous, and I thank you. As a director, I thank you.
Look, I'd like to thank all who were involved, the volunteers, their time and effort on the telephones entering the data and being ever so kind and understanding of all the listeners, ferrying in all the wonderful notes to the studios were those little letters of support, or what 4CRB means to you is absolutely amazing. All of those lovely little notes are the fuel that we require to keep moving on. It gives our volunteers the motivation they need to keep on keeping on, for want of a better term.
I don't do a music show. I'm not a disc jockey, if you like, as others are. And I came in and did small places, but I saw the way that you and Robin had been on air from day one to the end. And for those who don't know, and I'm sure many do, sitting at a desk and communicating is tiring.
Yes, it is.
And that's why radio shows go for half an hour, an hour. But what you and Robin did, you were there from the morning till 6 o'clock at night, and you mastered the music, which was good music. And I think a lot of the comments I heard from people listening, and through your encouragement, and you repeated it over and over again, but it never became mundane or repetitive for people to step up. And then I was shocked when you announced that only 2% of our listener base, and it wasn't criticising the other 98%, but only 2% donate.
Sure.
And so
that's an industry statistic, by the way.
Industry, is it?
So even for us, it's between 2 and 3%.
Well, that's amazing.
And it's funny that it is common across the industry. So,
well, just enough of this till we get on with today's show. But I do thank you, and I do thank Robin. I thank, of course, all the other volunteers. But Robin and yourself, you carried the load on air. Day in, day out, and I commend you.
We're the front face or the front line, but again, without all of those people behind us, it would be for nothing, I would say.
Well, I heard some very interesting news from a very good supporter listener who said to me, Judge, every time we speak or we have dinners, everyone loves your voice. And I said, oh, that's kind, thank you. She said, but for the first time, a very intelligent woman said, oh, good Lord, I'm sick of listening to that judge. It's monotone. He speaks in the same way, and he doesn't say anything that offsets his voice. So, no, I'm glad not to hear him. So I thought,
who said that?
I didn't ask the name, but listen, it was good because it brings home, doesn't it? You can't win everybody.
You can't.
And
that's the point. We try to be all things to all people.
We can't.
But we can't. And that's the answer.
Yeah, so that particular lady, I will try to modulate my voice and be a Welshman boy, and see if I can lilt it like the blood of my ancestors, so she might think differently. But if she doesn't, well, that's fine. We're a democracy.
And I think it's just you be you, David. That's the point. That's the charm of community radio.
Well, you've known me for years, and I think, am I myself?
You are. What you hear and what you see is what comes through the radio and transpires out the other end.
But you can't win everybody.
You can't.
And if you try to do that, you end up winning nobody.
Look, it's an interesting formula, community radio, because it is very, very different to commercial.
Yes.
Commercial's only focus is money, where community is a delicate balance between popularity,
yes,
and ensuring that you do have enough money to pay the bills.
Oh, and you brought that home spectacularly last week, and I won't ask you to name amounts, but I understand, checking today, the count is still going on, and the count is very positive. So again, thank you, everyone.
Yeah, especially in an environment where the cost of living is so high.
Yes.
It was just so wonderful to hear from all of you. The volume of people who were new donators had increased, which is great.
Yes.
It's nice to hear, and welcome to the family those people who have never donated to 4CRB before.
Yes.
And it is also just as heartwarming to have all of those wonderful people who have donated in the past.
And to add to that, even when I was in for the couple of hours on 3 days, to hear some people saying, look, I just can't afford it.
Yeah.
And, we're pensioners and we've always donated, almost like a please forgive us.
It was.
And your responses and Robin's to them were, no, that's not what we want. You're a listener. As long as you're listening, as long as you like what we're doing, if you can give, you can give. If you can't, you can't.
And that is
and
the way
I commend
it goes.
you for that as well.
Well,
All right, what are we doing?
Well, I was going to say that you can donate any time.
Oh, yes.
That one segment of 8 days is a fundraising event. It's a push, it's a drive, it's a telethon. Because if we don't ask, people sometimes forget to donate, but you can actually make a donation at any time. And our website's open 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and our wonderful volunteers man the reception counter 9 to 5, Monday to Friday.
And the important thing is that any donation over $2 is tax deductible.
Fantastic event, that one.
Yes, that is really good. So I think that, you and the station and Robin hit it on the head last week. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for your vote of
you're
confidence.
Welcome.
Well, today we thought we'd tackle, and it's due to a number of conversations that have happened around the station, and one text message saying, could David talk about here's the language, the demise of the Liberal and National parties. Now, I don't think it is a demise. I think that it's
more of a renewal.
Yeah,
it's a realising that what worked for the last 70 years needs to be refreshed and needs to be renewed. And if we go back to when Bob Menzies formed the Liberal Party.
And that was going to be one of my questions let's go back and look at it from a historical standpoint.
Most definitely. And he formed it on the basis of his time. I think it was the United Australia Party under Joseph Lyons, and he was the Attorney General in the late 30s. Now, he realised, and particularly when the war came and he was Prime Minister, Lyons had gone, he was Prime Minister for the first 2 years, but he wasn't popular because he spent more time out of Australia in England because he was on the War Cabinet. And the Prime Minister of New Zealand, the Prime Minister of Canada, the Prime Minister of South Africa, and the Prime Minister, obviously, of the United Kingdom. They and others formed the War Cabinet. Now, Menzies was a great arguer with Churchill, and he got a lot of support. Churchill was not liked because it was jealousy, really. He was too good, and he was good. And history showed us he remained there, although he got dumped before the end of the war. But he's gone down as this unique leader of the free world, more so even than Franklin Roosevelt, and Menzies was involved in all of this, and there was a push to have Menzies. They'd find a seat for him in England because he was entitled to. Because if you're an Australian, that you're also English, and so there was no separate passports or anything. And so there was a push to have him find a seat or take a seat in England and become Prime Minister. Now, it never grew to much, but there was a book written, I've forgotten the name of the author, in the early 80s called Menzies and Churchill at War. Now, Menzies was pushed over Halifax and Beaverbrook. Beaverbrook was a Canadian and a brilliant armaments minister. But again, he could sit in the British Parliament as a Canadian citizen. Menzies was, because he was a King's Counsel, was a tremendous speaker. And he had very good command of the English language, as did Churchill. But Menzies had it in that barristerial way. He was a top barrister, but he was known as the only one in the War Cabinet who really took it up to Churchill and argued with him. And I know that Halifax was one, Lord Halifax, and Halifax was a great pusher for appeasement. Even when the war was on, we must do a peace deal with Hitler, and of course Churchill wouldn't.
Yes.
And so the book goes, and I think remember I said I went to school with Sir Robert Menzies' grandson from primary school until year 12. Sorry, I'm wrong. It was his grandnephew from primary school to year 12, and I saw the Prime Minister when I was an 11-year-old boy at his house on birthdays. And Menzies was an imposing man, and that ultimately showed up in his term as Prime Minister. And so, anyway, Menzies, nothing came of it, and Menzies really got defeated, and he came back and he was defeated in 1941, and John Curtin became Prime Minister, and Curtin led Labor. He led Australia 41 up to 45, and he died shortly after the cessation of hostilities. But I think anyone, to be fair, he was a good Prime Minister. He really led Australia well during the war, but obviously you in office over that tumultuous time. So Menzies, and then when he died, the leadership of the Labor Party was not really as good as Curtin. Ben Chifley became the leader and Prime Minister, but in 1949 Menzies bolted back into office, and he stayed there until, 1977, when he retired and Harold Holt took over. And Menzies became a giant of a man in the Liberal Party. Now, his ideas were purely 18th century liberalism. That is, John Stuart Mill. These are great philosophers who were writing in the late 1700s, early to mid 1800s, who spoke about things that we just take for granted. That everyone has a vote. It had nothing to do with your wealth or how much land you owned. Everyone has a vote. That which we take for granted, freedom of speech, the reinforcement of parliamentary democracy, which had been around really since the Magna Carta, really reached its peak in the 1690s when we had a constitutional monarchy for the first time. And so Menzies was a real believer in all these things. So he was a real liberal in the sense of a liberal democracy.
Sure.
Now, that has all been perverted in our lifetime by left-wing dislike, if not hatred, of liberal principles. They'll claim that they are liberal, but wherever you see examples of left-wing governments that go too far, you've got socialism, and you don't have those freedoms.
I find it funny that you made that real connection to those liberal ideologies of the mid-1800s.
Yes.
And I challenge, if you talk to the young today, Oliver, who's panelling for us, my son, they would think liberalism would be referring to the Liberal Party more.
I know.
Moreover.
I know.
So if you said, are you liberal, it means one thing in one context.
Yes, it does.
And nowadays it comes down
and
to
it's
an
our
understanding.
fault because we don't teach this anymore.
Sure.
Liberals got nothing to do with the Liberal Party, and let's jump back to that. I'm looking at Oliver now, and I think I see a Luddite there. You know what a Luddite is? See, there's our education system.
Yeah, absolutely.
He doesn't have a clue. Luddites were people who went around in the mid-1800s in England, smashing small factories and spinning machines and big, long machines that spun cloth and made it, because it was taking away from the cottage industries. And I've been to see the remnants of the cottage industries in Sheffield, and you see where there were little individual foundries that made, from the medieval times, great broadswords, really made good English steel, probably not as good as Japanese katanas, but pretty good, and ruled in Europe, and Englishmen wielded their swords and they were strong. And so you saw these little individual foundries that had all been soaked up in the 1850s when industrialisation happened. The Luddites were people who didn't agree with that movement forward. Now, I think we all know you can't hold time back.
No.
I mean, my time was really when I was a teenager in my 20s, the 60s and 70s. And I find myself with my age group, lamenting the loss of, weren't they good times? They weren't. There's never good times. There was always problems. So your time is now, Oliver, but Luddites did not want to accept that. And so they would go round and break into factories and smash up spinning jinnies and all these things, saying, no, it's taking work away. Now, obviously,
we're ruining our child's future.
We are. and also, the great thing about, the great thing lost in the Industrial Revolution was these small, all over the country, because what happened in Industrial Revolution, everyone moved to London or Manchester, and that's when you got the terrible crimes of prostitution, poorhouses, and Jack the Ripper.
The Thames being horrendously polluted.
Yes, the Thames being absolute. So, now, what's this got to do with liberalism? Liberalism was a philosophy that, while it uplifted the status of individual men and societies and freedom of speech, freedom of thought, it also encouraged responsible government and responsible behaviour. So Menzies was really moved by all those things. Naturally, he was born, I think, in the 1890s. He was studying. Well, he was a really bright student. He went to what we would call a state school in a place called Jeparit, which is just a little country area in Victoria. But he was so bright, he won scholarships, and I've forgotten, it wasn't Haileybury, or he went to one of Melbourne's top. He was Scottish, so it might have been Haileybury. No, Scotch. Whatever, I can't remember, but he won scholarships to these top private schools, and he did really well, and he got into law in Melbourne, and the rest is history. So, what we've got today, if I look at the Liberal Party under Menzies and what formed it, and it started to go down even when Harold Holt took over. And then brilliant economist, but William McMahon, John Gorton, this tremendous fighter pilot in the Second World War, and he was a war hero, an Australian fighter pilot. But was he a good Prime Minister? I don't know. That's for others. So what has happened? We've seen the Liberal Party, and I should just interpose a bit, by the 60s, the Australian Country Party, and that was the party of the farming people, farmers. And there was a man called John McEwen, and he was affectionately known as Black Jack McEwen. And he was a smart, he was like Hilton Redding. He was that type of man. He was, he played, I don't have any education, but he was as smart as a tack. And he had a good grasp on economy and our wool and our wheat and everything. So they formed a tremendous partnership, the Liberals and the Country Party. And then that grew and grew and grew. Now look at it recently. Susan Ley and David Littleproud, decent people, but Susan Ley was not in the mould of Bob Menzies, and David Littleproud was not in the mould of Black Jack McEwen. Now, they shouldn't have had to have been, because they were in the mould for their time. Menzies, after the war, Australia rode on the sheep's back.
It did.
And we really reclothed Japan and Europe with wool. My family still today grows superfine merino wool that has been, since I was 11, always sold before it's off the sheep's back. And it was sold to Italian fashion houses, and it was sold to Japanese mills, because it's superfine merino wool used for making fine suits. So we had that in Menzies and McEwen's time. Then we had Doug Anthony, who was a pretty powerful character, good country party, but I think I became the Nationals under his leadership. And then we had, of course, Bjelke-Petersen here in the state. And so what did we end up with? Ley and David Littleproud, both decent people. But simply, in my view, and I don't want to offend those who are listening, but they were out of touch with modern thinking. Because when you have a leader, look at Menzies, look at Churchill, look at Franklin Roosevelt, look at John Kennedy, they might have not been very good in other aspects of their life. But I watched Kennedy just emerge on the scene, and they were natural leaders. Well, I don't want to be rude to good Labor people. Gough Whitlam was a natural leader, and he was, after the war, he was seduced by both Liberal under Menzies and Labor, and he finally chose Labor, and he became a top leader. Look at Hawke. Hawke was a leader, but Mr. Albanese, I'm sure he's a decent man, but he doesn't have that charisma of Hawke. And Paul Keating, sadly, he was quite an acid-tongued man. So normally you have to have people who are leading parties who firstly look like leaders and will get people to follow them. Now, sadly, Liberal and National Party have been sadly lacking in that. And I'm interested to see that today Matt Canavan has been elected the new leader of the Nationals. So he is a smart man with a top intellect, but he comes across like a national, like, "G'day, how are you?" and all that Aussie way, but smart. Doug Anthony was like that. Black Jack McEwen was like that. So my hope is that we get renewal in the Liberals under Hastie,
yes,
and the Nationals under Canavan.
Look, as much as I agree wholeheartedly with what you're saying, you need to be a leader, you need to be charismatic, you need to be able to speak and be understood clearly. The big issue here, I feel, is that you also need to be connected to the voters and the people. You do. And that, I remember a great story that was told about Churchill, who was on the verge of a big decision, and that was, is he going to capitulate or is he going to fight? And he went down to the train station, I think the Tube they call it.
Yes, he
hopped
did.
on the train, talked to some people on the way to where he was going, and they basically, the whole train said, no, sir, we're going to fight.
Yes.
And he went upstairs and said, well, that's what the people want to do. I'm going to be right behind them.
Now, what we've got to do, because I know we're running out of time, and I say this to the current Labor leadership, the current Liberal leadership, just those words you used, that's what the people want. Yeah. Now, I know Mr. Albanese and Mr. Burke and Miss Wong and all of them will say, well, we're doing what the people want. Now, I'd say I challenge you for that. What you're doing is enacting your manifestos. Now, your manifesto on the left is decent and fair, but how much can you say? And the people wholeheartedly have told us to do this.
Big difference, though, mate, if you say, well, the people voted us in, so therefore they asked us to manage the country on their behalf. We know what we're doing, as opposed to, well, we were voted in on the things that we promised and the things that we said we're going to do. There's been some course corrections we need to make, and that happens in anything.
Yes.
But it's still time to gauge the temperature of the people.
Look, maybe we should use it for future talks. It's time for Labor leadership, for Liberal leadership, for National leadership, for Greens leadership. Get on the train and travel with the people.
Nicely said, David.
Get on the train.
We might wind it up there because I know we could do another 25 minutes on it.
Well, let's do some more on this next week.
And we can.
Yes.
Thank you very much for your time this morning.
Thank you.
You've been listening to 4CRB's interviews and talkback series. Support local online content and become a financial supporter today at 4CRB.com.